On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a massive wave of military strikes against the Iranian military infrastructure and their nuclear sites. And almost immediately, it became exponentially harder to buy a house in America. And I know this sounds crazy because what do stealth bombers over Tehran have to do with a 30-year fixed mortgage in Ohio? But I started to look into the data and I realized that there is a deep, hidden pipeline that connects global war directly to the American dream. And to understand it, we have to look at this map. This here is the Strait of Hormuz. It's a tiny, narrow choke point about 21 miles wide at the narrowest point. 20% of the entire world's daily oil consumption flows right through this tiny gap. When the bombs started dropping on February 28th, major shipping lines panicked. Vessel traffic plummeted by 70% almost overnight. And when shipping stops, the price of oil shoots up. But here's where the story takes a weird turn in the US housing market. See, right before this conflict kicked off, the US housing market was actually getting fixed. In early January 2026, the Trump administration ordered a massive $200 billion intervention into the mortgage bond market. They effectively forced interest rates down to 5.98%, the lowest level in over 3 years. And this meant that millions of Americans were suddenly able to afford a home or to refinance their higher rate mortgage. But then the war hit. When oil prices spike, inflation spikes. And when inflation spikes, the Federal Reserve gets completely paralyzed. They can't lower interest rates anymore to help homebuyers because they have to fight inflation caused by the war. Economists are warning that the argument for the Fed to cut rates is evaporating right before our very eyes. And I found out that this isn't just a 2026 Iran problem, this is a historical rule. Let's go back and look at the Vietnam War. In the 1960s, American homeownership was booming. It was hitting 65%. But fighting a war is incredibly expensive. The Vietnam War cost the US about $352 billion in that year's money. And economists actually calculated that the money spent on Vietnam was enough to theoretically pay off every single mortgage in the United States at that time. Economists have a name for what happens next. It's called Gibson's paradox. When a country goes into a major war, money becomes scarce. So the natural interest rate wants to go up. But governments hate high interest rates during wartime because it makes funding the war look too expensive. So what do? They print money to keep borrowing cheap. And the result is massive inflation that eventually forces mortgage rates to skyrocket. So what's the result of that? Well, it's massive inflation that eventually forces mortgage rates to skyrocket. And it's not just the invisible world of interest rates. It's the physical stuff that houses are made of. A modern house is full of plastics, wiring harnesses, weatherproofing, and PVC. All of those are derived from petrochemicals that come directly from the Middle East. When you choke off the Strait of Hormuz, the cost of the raw materials to build a house can spike by 15 to 25%. And then you add the recent tariffs on construction materials and building a house became impossibly expensive. So what we are left with is a completely fractured K-shaped reality. Because the world feels so dangerous and so chaotic right now, rich international investors are looking for a safe place to hide their money. So they buy up prime American real estate, which inflates property values even more. Meanwhile, the average American is getting totally priced out. A recent survey from late 2025 to early 2026 found that a staggering 62% of Americans right now say that buying a house this year was unrealistic. In almost half of the country, I'm talking 46%, say that they no longer view homeownership in America as the American dream. Geopolitics isn't just something that happens over there. A military strike 6,000 miles away can send shockwaves through the ocean into oil markets and into our Federal Reserve. That means it directly impacts us right here in our neighborhoods. And right now, this could be very much the reason why your neighbor's for sale sign in their yard could potentially sit in their yard just for a little bit longer.